I don't know how to explain it. And it just became like water on a duck. It just slid right off. So then it was just, I had to adapt to that. All thoughts and feelings and everything were just sliding. There was no more landing place inside that was able to just know itself as that. It was just sliding. So process, the ability to actually process left. The ability to reflect stopped. To know itself as anything stopped. So oneness knowing itself as oneness was done. And unity had taken itself to its conclusion in a way. So what was next was maybe functioning to operate without any landing place needed, no self-awareness, even the divine self.
Welcome to the Endless Possibilities podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds.
Hello and welcome to the Endless Possibilities podcast. My name is Garrett and I am your host today for another amazing conversation. Today we have Susannah Marie on the show. Let me give Susannah a quick introduction. Susannah became a seeker at the early age of 7. She felt like she was engaged in a losing battle with the conditioned trance of the adult world, rendering the felt sense of unity she had throughout her childhood. Susannah sought for the lost part in various ways over the course of her young adult life, leading to the study of yoga, meditation, and consciousness. Finding a direction that helped make sense of her life was a relief to her system. The goal was a return to wholeness. Over time, Susannah was led to a few remarkable teachers and teachings, as well as a variety of difficult life lessons, which eventually cast her onto an empty shore where she could not sustain belief, even what spirituality could give her. For a long time, acquired conditioning, both her own as well as collective, fell away as she unraveled back to essential nature. Many types of awakenings and realizations have occurred over the years, and Susannah can now say that we humans are both simple and more complex than she could have imagined. For seeking to end is a relief. Remembering intrinsic wholeness is a grace and helps make life meaningful. The revelation of the emptiness of true nature while we move and live simultaneously as a human being is a miracle and mystery, one for which Susannah is grateful and which leads to her sharing. The best word that describes this truth for Susannah is remembering, because this is what she has always been. Only now it is becoming even more conscious of itself in a human form. Susannah, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks. So nice to see you.
Yes, I'm very excited to have a conversation with you today. So, can we get straight into it, Susannah? Can you give me a little bit of your background, maybe prior to your spiritual awakening? What got you, like, a lot of the people I speak with, there always seems to be something that pushes people into a spiritual awakening, if it's, suffering or it's some sort of a longing. So I'd love to hear, for the people who don't know who you are, a little bit about your story.
Sure. I just was interested really from a very young age, truthfully, like very young. Didn't know it was spirituality, but what I was interested in was what I saw with the adults around me, that they didn't seem to always be centered in their being and that they would go into a personality mode. And I was curious about it. And then I was kind of like in this beautiful oneness bubble with my brother for a very long time. And I just felt it ebbing, that oneness, this sense of innocence and wholeness that a child can live in, and just depending on one's life, that ebbs sooner or later, depending how long that can be maintained before the adult kind of hypnotic world, the trance of separation kind of enters, because it's the common belief, the collective belief that it seems like people just succumb to that Maya, to that separation. And I could feel myself losing that thread of feeling whole. And I, in fact, told my mother about it, but I didn't know how to voice it. And I think I was like 7 years old, and I told her that I was losing my childhood. And for me, that's the best, only way I could describe it. Is the innocence was going away. And I felt like that personality, that self structure, the separate self structure was starting to take hold. And I didn't have all those words for it. And then it didn't ebb away completely. There was a holdout. And I would say that holdout, when I was a teen, started to look for itself. It started to look for the wholeness again. And then when I was in my early 20s, I started to go after it in a big way with meditation. I started doing a lot of meditation and yoga and a spiritual seeking that was really hardcore. Like I just went for it.
And I mean, what came about that you knew meditation was going to lead you back there?
Oh, well, I was doing a year-long teacher training. I think I was 21 for yoga. And in that teacher training, we were asked to learn how to meditate. And I don't remember explicit instructions, but I remember that when I sat down for the first time, that I just went into this stream, and an unwavering stream. And it felt so good and home, like I was home, that I started meditating a couple hours a day. Yeah. And that really got what people, maybe some of your audience knows about Kundalini. And I didn't know what Kundalini was. It was in the early days. This is before, I'm going to be giving away my age here, but it was before the internet, with all the YouTubes and all the teachings that are so accessible. And it was even before the Power of Now and the books, those kinds of books. I found some books about saints, Indian saints, and I devoured them, and even Christian mystic saints, and I devoured those. And it must have come into my awareness, something about unity consciousness, spiritual realization, of course. People, use the word enlightenment. And it seemed so far reaching, but at the same time, there was something that just knew that there was truth to it. And my being was really, really longing. So I think the seeker, truthfully, is really just longing for itself.
Mhm.
So I was longing, and with meditation, when I first tried it, I just felt that longing being met, and I just felt the oneness right there. And it started to penetrate my life more. It wasn't just like, when I was meditating with the call on the cushion or whatever, and then there was life. No, they started to merge to where my life, I was able to touch on what I was touching on during meditation, which was this undivided consciousness. Now I have all these words. Now I know how to talk about it. Back then, it was just this kind of magical time of finding my way, you know,
Mm.
and it was very innocent.
Yeah. Very similar for me. I almost like somebody gave me a guided meditation and I went home and I'd never meditated before. I put it on and just went gone. It was like, oh, came back. It was like, what was that? I want more of that. And
Really.
it was the same. I speak to a lot of people who have gone through spiritual awakenings, and it just seems to be that a lot of them their first meditation is like the carrot on the stick. They get a kind of a peak experience or an opening, and then
Mm.
it's like, okay, I want more. That was definitely for me. And it was very similar. It was before YouTube, and I was going into the city in Dublin on the bus, going into bookstores and finding the self-help and finding books like The Four Agreements and Louise Hay, and not really knowing what I was looking for, but I knew I was in the right section. Something was bringing
Mhm.
me there. Yeah,
Beautiful. Yeah,
fascinating.
isn't that kind of like there's that mysteries at work, right? And it's drawing one home, and you can feel it. And you can feel like you're being led. I felt led.
I agree. It's almost like your environment starts trying to like bring you signs, push you, give you nudges to where yeah, you're supposed to go.
Hmm. Yeah, and you sharpen your listening along the way, right? Your ability to listen and follow.
Yeah, for me, it was like the universe is trying to communicate with me through songs, through messages, and I need to listen. I need to follow them, and I would, and it never got me. You know, it never failed me. I have to say,
Hmm.
yeah,
Beautiful. That's good. That's a blessing. That's one of the things I like to be able to support people in is learning how to listen because it's not necessarily always so easy for everybody. Yeah.
yeah. A
And
lot
it
of
can
people,
lead you and listening if it's not to really to that to truth that you're listening to, it can lead you astray in the sense of it's mind that you're following versus the true knowing, you know.
I was going to say that. Yeah, a lot of
Mm.
people, it's mind, and they can't discern between the mind and intuition filtering down. So a
Yeah.
lot of people tend to be afraid to listen to their intuition because they get it wrong, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Mm,
Yep.
okay. So tell me about the awakenings. When did the awakening start?
Hmm. When did they start? As soon as I started opening the door, it's like the you hear the knocking and you gotta open the door, and then what comes through is that it's spirit, it's divinity, it's presence. And when it comes through the door of our own being, it can create these dimensional shifts that we call awakening, right? There's my dog right here saying hello. You can't see her. But anyway, we call them awakenings. And they're just shifts in our ways of perceptions. And they are sometimes such big shifts that the contrast
Yeah.
is like, we call it awakening. And we're meant to keep going through different doors, over time. It's not just one realization, as you know. So I would say that, oh gosh, probably all along the way, from the very beginning, in my early 20s when I started doing the meditation and I was, and all the yoga, all this release and all this relaxation into relaxation is a huge doorway because then our defenses get lowered and what is our natural state, what's called our natural state, gets to present itself. And I would say that started at that time, that I would enter these peak experiences, these type of peak experiences where I would have days or hours of feeling at home inside or where everything felt connected, the oneness or a heightened awareness where things were vibrating, so is that an
Mm,
awakening? I don't know, but I think it was waking up to this to that which was in the background. They call
mm,
that presence, our being is always here in the background, and it's covered over by mind and the believing, in the separate self. It just kind of veils it. So when it comes into the foreground and it starts making an appearance, it feels so good, right? It feels
mm.
blissful. It feels so good. And could that be already the first type of awakenings? Maybe. But I would say that the mind had awakening Oh, probably in my 30s. I mean, I would say all along it would come in and out, but the like permanent kind of shifts, like where they never left, what they call abiding.
Yeah,
I would say most of those took place in my 30s and early 40s,
yeah.
where they just stuck, you know. So mind woke up to itself, might have been the first kind of what they call realization, self-realization,
Self-realization, yeah,
where
yeah.
the self realizes the self. So this a self which is luminous and always in the background, it knows itself as that consciously. So that's what awakening really is make is
Mm.
presence becoming conscious of itself.
And prior to that, it's sort of witnessing the life experience, right?
Oh, well, that's a stage, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a stage. Some people think of that as awakening, but yeah, I would say that the witnessing, you're right. So that ability to be self-conscious. So that's consciousness being able to witness itself, right?
Mm.
To know that it's to know the fact that it feels, to know the fact that it thinks, right? That it's doing.
Yeah,
That's that witnessing. And to strengthen that ability to be self-aware can lead to self being aware of itself.
yeah.
Yeah, if that makes sense. That will
It
make sense to you, but
it
to
makes
the
sense to me. It makes sense to me
yeah,
because I was witnessing for quite some time, not really knowing what witnessing or spiritual awakening was. I had been on a spiritual journey, but never really thought of myself as a spiritual seeker. I didn't understand enlightenment or awakening, or I wasn't really looking for it. But I all of a sudden I came across Eckhart, right? And Eckhart was talking about the power of now, and listening to his audiobook, I was like, oh, I somehow seem to overlook the present moment for some reason. Even though I was meditating, even though I was having mystical experiences, I just seemed to be in my head constantly, and then
yeah,
was witnessing for about a year or two before I had the self-realization happen. Yeah.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah, we do miss the present moment. Isn't it wild? We're like, that really is really oops, we were frozen there.
Yeah, you're
That's
back.
like the fundamental primary self-realization, you know, first entry is realizing that sort of this gap closing between yourself and this moment
Mm,
and just landing in the here and now, you know, is that's a huge dimensional shift. You know, it seems like they call it the natural state. It should be natural, you know. So mind wakes up to itself. That took place. And then I would say then it journeyed and oh, and everything returned back to source and as in terms of the separate self. Like it just was able to see that nothing that I took to be as real was necessarily true. So a lot of beliefs got seen through during that time period. The emptiness phase, as I call it.
And what is that like? Not this, not that. Is kind of your okay. Okay, great.
Absolutely. Yeah, like the nutty, not this, not that. For things to be seen more as they really are versus the projection onto it from the separate self projects onto everything and puts an overlay over reality and it doesn't see clearly, you know? So I had these moments of bliss of just looking at a lamp and seeing clearly, looking at whatever. It seems like you know what I'm talking about.
Okay, it's like a portal opens up, right? It's like you're
Yeah.
abiding as the self, and then the self knowing itself. Somehow it feels like it's internal. It's, it's like then all of a sudden it points its attention outwards and starts to see itself as reality.
hmm hmm Yeah, it sees it without that separate self sense overlaying it.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
not a permanent shift, I would have said. It was kind of for me it was a an opening up and a closing down, but always abiding as the self.
hmm Yeah, well, I think that it comes in layers. You
Mm,
know, what opens up with the mind waking up to itself is one. layer. And then when the awakening descended, it's kind of like a descent for many people. It's a
Yeah.
descent of awakening. And then it descended into the heart. And the heart is a center of intelligence where unity lives, where our ability, the ability to know everything as one is activated, but through the heart, not just through the mind. And a whole nother more intimate layer and opening of realizing what this reality is. It's not so cool
Yeah.
and cool tones like with the mind waking up to itself. Kind of a more removed, cool, not cold, but just sort of removed because it's going into the transcendent of its own nature. And with heart, it comes in and it enters the content of this world, knowing it as itself. So then it's very intimate and full of technicolor and warmth.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
fullness, right?
Full, full of sensation. It's very
Mm.
embodied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I don't know if you experienced, but I was meditating one day and it was like a trap door opened up and my awareness just went whoosh, down. And I was like, what was that? And it felt like I was now perceiving from the heart center. Like I was no longer looking, centered up here, but
Right.
down. And now I could perceive
Beautiful.
from both centers. Yeah.
How beautiful. How
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. It does it when it's ready. Okay. It does it when it's done. Okay, that's done enough. Maybe I'll go back and do a little cleanup, but that's done enough
Yeah.
with beliefs or whatever. And then it sinks down into the heart and there is no escaping that under that knowing. It's such a beautiful, beautiful shift.
Mm, I
And so,
agree.
yeah, yeah. And then that lived there for a while, and then I would say that over time, it kept descending into the belly, into the gut area, which is where our existential understanding of life lives, our relationship to life, our relationship to being here. And, and that includes any resistances to being here. That includes, the fears of survival. So that's a big landscape.
So can you tell me what gets worked out? So we're talking head, heart, gut. So
Mm,
so in the head, the awakening, we're kind of waking up, not this, not that, right? We're seeing through all the illusion. I am not my emotions. I am not my mind. I'm not so and so. It drops down into the heart. There's an awakening through the heart. There's a fullness. There's a seeing of the self in the outside world, like again for me there was like an extra quality seemed to be, kind of animating reality, almost like a light that I didn't see before. And then what happens when it drops into the gut?
mhm. What happens is, and I don't think that it's as clear when it's happening. It's more murky,
Mm.
you know? It's like going deeper down into the muck of the pond. You're going through the stratas of the pond. The top strata might be mind, and then, heart, and then gut would be like what lives more in shadow, more unconscious to itself. Okay. So I think that when one is in that territory, one might not even know it, but what could be taking place is just looking at deeper aspects that are being held in the body and in beliefs too, like relationship with money, relationship with others in a deeper way, some patterns and behaviors that are wanting to be uprooted, that aren't clean and are kind of sticky, you know. So like that kind of excavation is going to be taking place, and sort of these things are being uprooted through consciousness itself, or life force energy is wanting to have all of us, this whole, our whole being, which is the divine, God, that wants it all to be as cleaned out and reflective as possible of what is true. So it's kind of like uprooting deeper stuff.
For me, it seemed to be a clearing out before the unity shift. There was some. I got the opportunity to do a little bit of psychotherapy. I noticed that some issues related to like abandonment, my
Mhm.
mother, seemed to come up, and you kind of described it well. The shift dropping down into the heart was very clear, but it wasn't so clear dropping into the gut. It was more sort of a gradual dropping down. I
Mhm.
didn't notice it the way I noticed the trapdoor dropping
Mhm.
into the heart.
Yeah, and these things don't have to be so linear.
Yeah.
Some people can work, I mean, like, and it can call you, the gut can call you at any time to do deeper work on these existential behavior patterns that are being acted out in life that aren't so healthy. Like maybe going for the wrong people romantically, or
Mm,
or saying yes when it's not good for you in any, in work or whatever. These different kinds of things that really have to do with our relationship to life. But as it sinks down, the truth kind of starts to take over more, right? With this descent, it does it on a deeper level in order to unify and have truth be just sort of coming through without any, barrier. It needs to be unprotected. So many of us don't even know to what degree we're holding back from being here in life, and just saying yes to being here. It's a ongoing kind of exploration, right? How much are we
mm,
saying yes? But at some point, it doesn't have to be perfect. None of it is perfect. Mind doesn't have to be all released and freed up. The heart doesn't have to be 100% knowing everything as itself. It'll just do it as in its own timing. And then with the gut, it's when it's done enough and it's kind of like done its own koan. Also, it's sort of
mm.
the gut is more like a koan. Koan and
Yeah.
Zen, it's like this unresolvable paradoxical kind of question. And it has to do with like that, who am I, but more on the gut level. And do I have a yes to being here? That's kind of its question, maybe. How much am I willing to be here? How much am I willing to be with what is without wanting to make that go away? What is? It has to do all with the way things are, and to be stopped so completely wanting to do little Houdini maneuvers to get out of the
Mm,
way things are in the moment. That's all gut. So when you're finally stopped trying to just pull another rabbit out of the hat to escape the reality as it is in the moment, then something can spring loose. And that would be called a gut awakening. So it's not trying to resist what is.
okay. And you brought up Kundalini earlier on. So is the Kundalini part of that process, Susanna?
Oh, Kundalini is Shakti, that's divine, the divine feminine. That's, matter means mother in Latin. This is matter. This is, we have emptiness and form, and they are unified, they become unified, one thing. Both are divine, both are that, right? Emptiness is not more that. Form and matter is, and everything that's appearing is not more that. So they become unified because they are two parts of one whole.
Mm,
So Shakti, Kundalini, they call it, is in Hinduism and in Sanskrit. She's like that. She's the dancing, life force energy that is sort of like the seed that's planted in every human being, at the base of the spine, they say, and people can do their own research on it. And it's not necessarily a belief. It's like when it wakes up inside, it's not a belief anymore. And I experienced it before I even knew what about it. So yeah, So just with
Wow.
all that meditation can like jumpstart, and they call it the serpent, she like goes up from the base of the spine and goes up to journey through these different nadis to make it to a full, what they call enlightenment or whatever, from the to the
Crown
crown.
awakening. Yeah.
Okay. And it will, the Shakti, so basically it's life force energy wanting to help liberate us. Okay. So it's on a journey of liberation in support of this waking up. It's so cool. It's like this God force and, goddess force put inside of us. And it might encounter, and usually does encounter, some blockages along the way. I know I did. And that's when, for some people, maybe you, I know I did a little bit, had some kriyas. And kriyas are these movements that happen when the Shakti, it bumps up against a blockage.
Mm.
Okay. And so then we'll get a little spinal kind of movement or something until it's broken through. Sometimes we need a little help, a little body work or something. Yeah.
And do you feel that it's like a purification process for the body, for the energetic system? Because i- in my understanding of what was going on in my system, it was almost like there was a rewiring of my nervous system when the Kundalini was moving, right? New
Mhm.
cabling, the old cabling taken out, new cabling pulled in
Mhm.
to be able to hold and maintain the higher states of awakening.
Beautiful. That's lovely. Yep. I would say definitely. I called it like the divine vacuum cleaner
Yeah,
because I actually could hear in my inner ear, I could hear this high-pitched humming.
I used to have it. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't tinnitus or tinnitus or whatever.
Yeah.
It was this, and I would have it during meditation too, but it would happen with when the Shakti was turned up, the volume was turned up. And what it is, it's the Shakti Kundalini going, and it's dissolving and alchemizing the blockages and things that's coming up across. And yes, rewiring the nervous system. Yeah.
Mm,
So the nervous system can be flexible enough to be able to withstand the abiding awakening, and so that it doesn't fry the nervous system, fry everything up, because it's a it's a strong current.
it feels like you've been plugged into the mains, right? It's like
Yeah.
you touch things, you get electric shocks, there's a current moving. It's yeah. And I think like you said it, it's not a belief. It's not like, oh, I think there's
Mhm.
Kundalini. It's when it's moving through your body. It's like you
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
mistake it.
No, you can't mistake it. And sometimes it's so strong that it can be a little scary, you know, but it's teaching one to let go.
Mm,
It's actually very, it's some people have really difficulties with Kundalini.
yeah.
I don't think I did. I think that it was just strong enough that I was able, but not too much, that I was able to integrate and integrate and integrate. It's asking to be, up level and integrate more divinity over time, actually, and to be able to also go through what it is bumping up against and work and releasing, because it's kind of like it's like a stream or a river, okay? And it comes up against some blockages and some boulders and some dams or whatever. When it comes up against a dam, that's your nervous system. That's going through the spine, actually. When it comes up against a blockage that's bigger and stronger, it's going to cause more pain, and it's going to be pushing through. And if it does manage to push through, like a river going through a dam or something, it might be experienced as a bit as that could be experienced as an awakening too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
beautiful. And did you experience the full Kundalini? It went all the way up into the brain eventually?
Well, it did. I fortunately I didn't really have a story at the time about, and I didn't have a teacher at the time to explain anything. So I can just report what really took place versus any belief or story of that, oh, and now it's supposed to do this, it's supposed to do that, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which can get in the way of spirit, of true movement, true freedom. But anyway, so yeah, it eventually went up into the head. And I remember I had a blockage at the base of my spine, I mean my base of my neck. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I had the
You're
same. Yeah,
you did too? Yeah,
yeah,
you're nodding. And when it hit that, it pushed, and then I swear I felt like my head was popped off,
yeah.
and my body was freaked out. My heart was pounding so fast. I was in meditation. I must have been in my early 20s. I was in meditation, and I thought, oh shit, I'm dead. I'm dead. But then I thought, wait, your heart doesn't beat fast if you're dead.
Yeah.
But I was just like, it just exploded, and just kind of went out into the to wherever, right? To a place where you couldn't even reflect or think. I think that's when it busts through this impediment. And that blockage for me, what it represented was a separation between head heart, and something that had been built up, over time, of probably a protection or belief or whatever, that they can't be united. It just kind of just sits here. Mm.
Yeah, I had the very same, like a knot right where the spine meets the skull. And when mine went up, it got trapped in the neck, and it was like a ping pong ball going bouncing from and
What?
yeah, and mine couldn't get through. So what it decided to do was it diverted, and it went up the outside of my head and went in through the top of the head and down into the brain.
Really?
Yeah, I mean
Very creative.
it's
Very
got an
creative.
intelligence all of its own. It was like, okay, we can't get through, divert, and it went up and in, and then I had the it felt like the crown awakening. Um, but
Mm.
fascinating. So the unity shift, did that come after the Kundalini awakening? Because it seems that the Kundalini reaching the crown or the brain, it signifies the lotus flower, right? Which is unity.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, that's cosmic consciousness, that's unity in a way, but what knows unity and lives it is through the heart,
Mm,
really. This
yeah.
can know it this way, but the intimacy is through the heart. Sometimes what can happen, and I guess it happened for me, is that it can go through this journey as it did in my early 20s, by 24, I think. But then it needs to be lived out in life.
Mm,
And so then it just like it didn't start all from scratch. No, there was a purification and everything, right? But then it's kind of like, okay, how does it do life? How does it live in relationships? How does it do work? How does it live with the expectations of my parents? I was still, pretty young, what they wanted for me with my studies and all that. And going against the grain, I was going against the grain with who I was. So then I think that it gets to be, it's like done on layers. So there's the layer of the background's been woken up to. It's done there. But then you have these different layers of body and mind even. It's like these subtle body layers. So then it needs to be woken up through and through. So then there was more to be done, is all I can say. There was more to be done. And it did it all very intelligently. It did it via during life, when I had children, and then when my brother died, and it did it during these different phases of my life, to where it's like then it was abiding, like, okay, now it's living awakened mind, now it's living awakened heart, now it's living what the gut might still have not fully realized. So I think that it's multifaceted and layered. This
mm.
whole awakening thing is not so clear, cut.
It's not linear, definitely not.
And not even just linear. Linear is not even one of them, but it's like I think that truth penetrating is on, like, it keeps going. It keeps deepening.
And I listened to one of your previous interviews, and you spoke about hanging out in Unity for quite some time, right? And it's been a
Yeah,
really beautiful place. And it was, I think you described it as this is my creation, right? This is all for me. And then eventually you woke up even from that, right?
true. Yeah, so 9 years in Unity. And
Wow.
so like I had said earlier, I was popping in and out of it. Like I was in that bubble as a child, and then it wasn't that Unity wasn't strong enough to be abiding during this coming into more interaction with a human collective, belief system that was believes that just lives out separation. And then it was bouncing back and forth like a ping pong ball for me. Unity would ping pong until it became abiding, um, and where it never left again. Okay, that's a longer story, but it never left again. And then there was a deepening in that for I would a good 9 years of where all that had taken itself to be separate in the body, really body, mind, psyche, you know, was harmonized, and but it was done via the divine center. It was no more separation. It was the divine center was looking at itself and alchemizing everything, saying this is it too. That was my mantra. This is it too, you know.
Just I'm just bridging, right, from my experience. Did you notice that the walls of separation, like that were kind of keeping you, for me, that's what unity felt like. It felt like the container came down, right? And it felt like the center then sort of spilled out beyond the limitations into the surroundings, and it kind of everything kind of became panoramic. Not not particularly like I wouldn't describe it as like with the GC, the God consciousness, that phase, the heart center, that was like, wow, beautiful bliss, the heart opening. Whereas unity consciousness, there was a quietening of the mind, and then the edges came down. But because it normalized very quick for me, like within 2 weeks, it was like, did I even have a shift? This feels like it was always the way it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how people experience things, so unique in a way. For me, unity was more like the X-ray eyes of that God consciousness was penetrating everything, all matter, and knowing itself as that. And so it was knowing itself as the bug, as that homeless person, as the
Mm,
and then it was doing it also within every little movement of feeling, all past, anything that was not that wanted to come back home into understanding that it was that anything that was created out of separation, beliefs, all that was kind of just met by that, it was met. And so there was this long period of harmonization of like so that speech was really cleaned up, to where it was no more harm, no more
mm,
harm wanting to be caused.
mm.
No, and no more self-harm, no more anything that felt like it was unworthy or unwelcome. All that got reconciled. It was a big period of reconciliation. Internally, externally, it was more like it was every molecule was known as itself. Anything the gaze went to was known as itself. And it was, 4D, whatever. It wasn't, it was it penetrated the stratas deeper than superficial reality.
Okay, okay. So after 9 years, what happened?
Yeah, so then there's this unity is still the divine center is what knows itself as that. Something knows itself as that. So we were talking earlier about self-consciousness, the ability for that we are able to look at ourselves, this ability to be self-conscious. is when the separate self imagines itself to be true, it's the separate self looking at itself. So it feels like an object to itself. It feels like there's two here, right? There's that one is separate from life. And when there's a deep awakening, there's no more separation, but there's still something that is the divinity itself or God essence or whatever, knows itself as that. So in unity, it can be very, very, very subtle and so thinned out that you don't even know it's there anymore, that something is aware that everything is that, you know, it's still some thin awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that there was I am one with everything. There was still a sense of I think, in unity
Mm.
for me.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, this is my creation. Oh, I am everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that and that's interesting because that's another kind of evolution. I am that, I like to go through real quick. Nisargadatta, he said,
Mm.
I am that, and that is that, and then it's just that, I guess. That would be basically it. So until it's just that, there's still something that knows itself as that,
Yeah.
okay? And it isn't the separate I, right? It's still something knows itself. So I would just say that in unity, it's still a landing place. I've, done talks on this, on my YouTube station. Unity is a landing place, and you don't know it because it gets so subtle. You don't know it until it just like that little platform of landing place gets yanked out, and then there's no more, you know, that knowing itself.
Okay. So is that the dissolving of the I thought or the I-ness?
No, no. Mm-mm.
Okay.
The dissolving of I is that happens all along the way. And this is where a lot of people get confused with that. I don't call it no self anymore because you can have an awakening of mind and feel like there's no separate self anymore and call it no self. The dissolving of the I takes place over time and it gets replaced by the divine I, right? I am that, right? That is that. So basically, there's still what I really want to say is that it has to do with mind bending on itself. That stops. So the mind, which is self consciousness, self awareness, the ability to be self aware, whether it's the separate I or the divine self, it's still bending, it's still doing a number, and it's looking at itself in some way. And that's sort of implanted in human beings. And then I think that that just gets turned off like a switch.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for me, I don't know when it happened, but I was again sitting in meditation, and I noticed my awareness dropped down into the heart space, and I became aware of like it looked like a little whack-a-mole, right? That was popping its head up out of my heart. And I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? What's that? And I intuitively knew that there was a conduit. It was like a little chimney was kind of popping up out of the top of my heart. And I knew that there had been a conduit that went from the heart up into the intellect, and the conduit was now gone, and this little whack-a-mole had no way to get back up into my intellect, and it was trying to jump one or two, three times, and then
Mm.
had nowhere to go and fell back into the heart and dissolved. Now, I know it's metaphorical, right? I know there is no little whack-a-mole, but I think it was me having a way of understanding what happened. It was like the eye has fallen into the heart and dissolved.
Beautiful. Doesn't and Ramana talks about that,
Yes, yes, yeah, I discovered
I
that.
love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, the I disappears into the heart. And then there's the existential I in the gut, right? That that also has a doership, a survival doer that's there that wants to be seen through.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then once that's been done enough, then this other thing that been speaking about that I didn't even know was coming took place. And it's this, mind bending that gets, stopped.
Okay. So tell me about that.
Okay. Hard to describe
Yeah.
out of all of them. the
Yeah.
hardest, the hardest. So I'll tell you what took place.
Yes,
It
I'd
was
love to hear
really
it.
beautiful. Okay. It was a really beautiful, interesting moment, different. So I had been in this 9 year, what I called the embodiment phase of unity. So, this is my map. Everybody has their types
Yep.
of maps, what unity means. I've come across some people that unity doesn't mean this at all, where there's embodiment taking place. Okay. And I was content to live in this forever. Like it was just such a beautiful time, just oneness, wanting itself. And I was taking a walk in this beautiful place here in the Bay Area in Marin, in Northern California, by the ocean, old growth trees. And there was this beautiful, beautiful old oak, a couple 100 years old at least. And was looking at it. And normally when I looked at something, I was it, it was naturalized. There was no like, oh, here's me looking at something and I'm it as well. None of that. It was all done. It was like way done. It was just it would just be like molecularly, it would just be one with it, especially if I stopped and just looked. But when I looked at this, there was no more that it just like it shifted. I don't know how to explain it. And the looking it didn't stop it and know itself as that anymore. It was like the fluidity of being able to look at something stopped. I don't know how to explain it. And it just became like I felt like a duck, like water on a duck. It just slid right off. So then it was just, I had to adapt to that. All thoughts and feelings and everything were just sliding. There was no more landing place and slot inside that was able to just know itself as that. It was just sliding. So process, the ability to actually process left, the ability to like reflect stopped, to know itself as anything kind of stopped. So oneness, knowing itself as oneness, was done. And then there was just an adjustment period to that. It took a while. It took a while for functioning to really get on board. It was like I think it was a gut release for sure, but that gut release somehow had a connection to the self-reflection. For me, they both maybe gut release is separate for some people and doesn't do this kind of the ending of self-reflection, but for me, they happened in the same instant that the real fundamental final release of grappling with what is in a way ended, and unity had taken itself to its conclusion in a way. So what was next was maybe functioning to operate without any landing place needed, no self-awareness, even the divine self.
Okay. Without a center, right?
Well, without a center, you know, if that's the divine center, is first it's a separate self center in the center. When we look at ourselves, we see separate itself. And then when there's awakening, whatever type of awakening you look, and it's the divine center looking. No center, I don't know if that's really a good explanation anymore. I don't know if that model really fits with this. It's almost like, so to have a center, you have to have a periphery.
Mm.
So it's kind of like the way I see it is what kind of took place more descriptively is like imagine a soap bubble, that's pretty a bubble and it's floating. And it's just this kind of beautiful translucent thing. And inside is no center already, growing an awareness of itself as being no center. And the outside is just pure that space. Okay. So what happened for me is that bubble popped And so there's actually no more anything. Yeah. No
So
definition, no context.
yeah, yeah, it's funny because about about a month or two ago, I made a video. I was out walking, and the whole concept of the bubble came to me, and I made a video, "Awakening Beyond the Bubble," and I
Ah,
described it exactly the way you did, and I even put the thumbnail exactly the way you described it.
really? I
Yeah.
promised you I did not
No,
copy
no, no.
you.
I know that. I know.
I'm just playing with you.
But it's almost like I think it's like the center and the edges just pop or something, right? And it's just, but I guess we use different language, right? But I'm piecing that together as what I experience as Brahman, right? It was like, how do I describe it? It's almost like the self as a droplet, right? The it gets pulled out of the bubble outside of creation, and it kind of merges with nothingness or primordial consciousness, and it remembers itself before it became conscious as part of a process, right? We talked about the awakening process being a remembering, right? So it's like you're remembering the stages. You're going from like identifying as the human, identifying as the witness, into the self, into the God consciousness, unity consciousness, and eventually it just pops out of creation into nothingness, primordial consciousness. That's how it was for me. And then it was sort of like I was here and my awareness was partitioned outside of creation. And it kind of felt like everything I looked at was now being projected onto a screen of nothingness. And it also felt like karma was no longer being produced. And I felt like a ghost. I felt like enlightenment fell away, the awakening fell away, and there was just I've broken the human. I don't know if that maybe we use very different language, but is there any
Mhm.
similarities in how you?
There are some, yeah.
Yeah.
There are some the what did you say? Something about projection screen. What did you say?
Yeah, it felt like everything I was seeing was now being projected onto a screen of consciousness, right? And behind the screen, I just knew that there was nothing. There was no, everything was just
Mm.
manifesting right in front of my eyes for me to experience. And when I turned away, it
Mhm.
dissolved or it crumbled and it just
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
exist. Yeah.
Well, that's these kind of ways of perceiving, that perceiving itself, is you're going to be unique. But what I do relate to is that you can't turn around and see anything.
Mm,
And for me, I would liken that, and maybe you can see if that resonates for you, is that there's no more ability to reflect. And it's not even the separate self or the divine self or anything. It's just that there's no more able to look. I cannot look anymore. I cannot look. If whatever looking is happening in the moment. It's
mm,
just like there's only ability to, if reflection happens, it's just in a looking in the moment with no actual movement
mm,
of backward step looking, whatever can look, which is self-consciousness that, and so the reason why I even use the word of this ability to self-reflect kind of ends, I really need to acknowledge Bernadette Roberts, that Christian mystic nun who passed away 3 years or so ago, maybe four now, who wrote some books, What is Self, you know, No Self, and all these self books. Really beautiful description and clear description of something that happens, that can happen after the unity's been done, for her done. And that her map really resonates with me in that way. And I think that Adya, in my conversation with Adya Shanti in that Buddha at the gas pump interview, we both acknowledged her. I acknowledged her map, and because I could tell that he was using some of her terms as well. So she put it on the map that this ability for mind that has been sort of evolutionarily put in there to be able to be self-conscious there's an ending to it.
Mm.
Because see, if you can't look anymore, that's the end of self-reflection, you know?
So it could be related, but I couldn't find people, right? I would go, oh, I have parents. They haven't come into my mind. And I would have to really like
Mm.
to try and locate them somewhere. And the
Mm.
same thing would happen with my kids, right? I would be with
Mm.
my kids, I'd be looking after them in the morning, getting them ready for school, walk them to school, and then turn around and it was like they were gone. I couldn't find
Yeah,
them, until I would go back to get them, and then all of a sudden they were
interesting.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know. I wonder if some parts of, and I'm just, wondering.
sure.
Like I said earlier, that awakening is not, we've said both of us, it's not linear,
Mm,
and that some parts can still catch up, you know, during like even this kind of passageway that we're talking about,
mm,
that that something doesn't really exist unless it's
been looked at. Yeah,
remembered
yeah.
or it's just like, so maybe there, so I don't know, it's so mysterious. Yeah, that didn't happen for me to where it was more like all of the previous understandings were integrated into the now, right? So all the stratas of life experience and awakenings and understandings were all here now that could be accessed and didn't require any looking, self-reflection to access it. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it was a funny one because I actually I had the experience of it before the shift into unity, right? And I didn't know what it was. I was meditating and all of a
Mm.
sudden it was like I was faced with a black hole and I was like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And I knew that I had to go into it. So I kind of just went, "Okay, I'm stepping into it." And it felt like I was going to be not die, but deleted. I was going to be erased from the server. It was terrifying, right? And I went, came back, and I was like, I don't ever want that to happen again. That was terrifying. I don't know what that was, but had no framework. I had absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Then I had to shift into Unity, hung out in Unity for a while, and then came across teachings about this non-existent state. And when I started to have an intellectual understanding of it,
Mm.
then it clicked into place. It was like I had the experience and then the understanding, and then it unfolded. And
Yeah.
I was stuck there for about 2 years though. I was kind of like walking around going, everything's an illusion, nothing is real, you know.
Oh,
Yeah, it was very, and I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it.
well, that's
Um,
kind of freaky in itself.
It is quite freaky. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when you shifted in, did you
That
have
was,
someone?
oh, did I? Oh, sorry. Did I have someone? I met Adyashanti when I was in my deep emptiness unfolding, which is very similar to what you're describing. Things were ghostly. It was like all meaning was being taken back
Yeah.
into source, back what had put meaning out into the world was being returned.
Mm,
And that's when I met Adya. And so I was already having that. And then once it was done, that's when unity came in after it was done.
interesting. Yeah. That's
Mm.
kind of how it happened for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, not how the mind would imagine it to be, right? If you listen to the TM models, they seem like they're very much like a process. This stage, that stage, next stage
Okay.
doesn't seem to happen that way.
No, and it is helpful to have someone, Gareth.
You were
It's
very lucky to have Adia.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had Adya at the time, but honestly, I did most of it myself. And the what
Mm,
I had Adya at the time was more like I had the Sangha because I was in the Bay Area where he would
mm,
teach. And I had that container that was mirroring, and he was mirroring just how safe it is to just let go. And so I was lucky. And I really
mm.
recommend that for people who, and you're in that stage, you don't have to go alone at it
Yeah.
alone. Yeah.
Yeah. I had Adia's The End of Your World audiobook,
Mm.
and I used to listen to that every day. And I mean, I did see him in person, but for me, Adia was like this really soft, gentle, his voice, but he also felt like a samurai warrior with a sword, and he was like chopping pieces of ego from me every day listening to him. I would feel like he
Yeah,
was dissecting me.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Truth is ruthless,
yeah,
and because it wants nothing left except what's real to be left. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's ruthless.
Is there anything else you feel that I haven't covered or asked you that you would like to talk about?
Oh, just that, even though we're describing kind of our own maps, which would
Mm,
intersect in various more than not. Everyone who's listening, your journey is going to be different, and to not want to speed up the process and imagine that there's an end goal to get to, because there's nothing like a process not being able to be completed by putting it into time more.
mm,
And each process, each period of time that one goes through, even the doldrums, even the long periods of not knowing what's taking place, and getting comfortable with not knowing, that's a whole landscape, that there is real purpose to it. I would say there's real purpose, and to really sincerely go through each stage and really let it do you. Let
mm,
it complete the process. It knows what it's doing. This intelligence that is wanting us to remember, and for us as that to remember. It wants to complete the process and know itself as that through and through, and then live it, right? Live this life in a
And
direct way.
it's not
In a
always perfect
direct
either,
way.
right?
Sorry?
It's not always perfect either, like the mind imagines it to be once awakening has happened.
Nothing. Well, the way that life goes is not necessarily a reflection
Mm,
of as if it's going to all work out. You can still get sick, you can
mm,
still have financial issues, you can still have all kinds of stuff. Death can come, death to loved ones. It doesn't necessarily mean that life is going to work out for you in the way that you think. Just look at
mm,
all the different beings that we admire, saints or whatever, teachers, and look at their lives. They die of cancer, they
mm.
do, all kinds of stuff happens. That's not what this is about. Truth is for its own sake. It's not in order to be able to give us that happy life that we think we're going to get.
That's
Would
really
you say
beautiful.
that's true for you?
I would totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean your relationship to how reality unfolds changes, right? You definitely
Oh, for
act
sure.
differently to the stuff that arises, but it doesn't mean it gets better or easier. Or actually, I think it can get harder. It's like life is like, oh, okay, we're gonna, you know. eh, more opportunities or more, it's like the difficult level gets turned up, right? It's like consciousness wants to play out through a harder stage in the video game. That's how it is for me
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And just so that people wonder, well, what is this even about if it doesn't make life better? It does, like you say. Well, we're just living how life is meant without any layers in between. It's just life living itself.
Mhm.
And that has its own purpose, its own enjoyment, its own goal. And that's the natural state.
Mm.
That's your birthright. And so that's the goal. That's why this happens, is just like a tree being itself. Treeing, we're humaning at that point. We're humaning.
I love it. I love it. Susanna, you as a teacher, how can people get in contact with you and find your work? And you have a book
Oh,
as well, right?
no, I'm just a walking book. I don't have it out yet.
Okay, okay. I thought I
One
heard it
day.
in one of the interviews you were working on a book.
Oh, I'm always working on this book, but one day. No,
Okay.
it's my website, you probably put it in the
I'll put it in the description. Yeah.
SusannaMarie.org.
Yeah.
Yeah, just I do mentoring, I do courses and retreats and so on. Yep.
And a YouTube channel?
I have a YouTube channel, yeah, with so many videos. so
Okay.
much. Yeah, so
So
much content.
I will link down to the website,
Thank
YouTube
you.
channel down below if people want to get in contact with
Yeah,
you. I mean, that's kind of what the podcast is, right? It's sort of like a directory where people can listen to the conversations, and if they resonate, they can go. I mean, some of the people, I don't know if you know who Harry Alto is. Have you worked with
of
Harry or?
course. Yeah, yeah. He's in a movie with me. I'm in a documentary. Yeah.
Yeah, Harry did two interviews with me, and the first one he said he sent me an email about 2 or 3 weeks after the interview, and he said he almost had to close everything down. He was getting so many people contacting him.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Lucky guy. No,
yeah,
yeah, no, he's well, his art is amazing.
he's incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a
Well,
lot of
cool.
fun. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
thank you for doing this. I
Thank you
mean,
so
look,
much.
it's so nice to get to know you and to feel you and to hear your own journey and how amazing it is. You are there,
Thank you.
outside Dublin with raising children, and that this is taking place, that, life is living itself out there,
Yeah, yeah.
in
Thank you
this
so
way.
much. Thank you so much. Thank you to the viewers and listeners. Yeah, thank you, Susanna. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye. Thanks, guys.
This has been the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds. Garrett is a lifelong seeker of truth, a spiritual teacher and author, and it's his passion to delve into the profound world of consciousness. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, the podcast is available on YouTube and all the major podcasting platforms. Find us on Instagram at _mother_force. Take care, and we'll see you soon on the Endless Possibilities Podcast.